attendees here to, oh.
There it goes.
There it goes. I just want to invite everybody to this volunteer recruitment session. My name is Karen Holloway. As I said, I'm the MC. I work for the Saskatchewan Health Authority. I'm a volunteer coordinator. I've worked previously in other roles as well, including health promotion. So I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of people and be on a lot of WebExes. So I'm really looking forward to this. I am a board member of the Administrators of Volunteer Resources. Our goal is to unite administrators of volunteer resources to promote the best practices, to support professional development, and to facilitate networking and advocate for the profession and its impact on the province. Okay, so for the second year in a row now, we're hosting a midwinter virtual networking event. This one is with professional development attached.
And then I'm just going to introduce the topic a little bit here. So volunteer recruitment is a perennial topic amongst all of us. I'm sure we've gone to many sessions about it. I found a poster the other day from AVR Saskatchewan's predecessor organization from the early 90s, advertising a very similar event. So it's not a new event, and yet it feels a little bit different this year as we've moved through so many phases of the great COVID-19 disruption. And as Joanna well knows, because Joanna worked on it, the SAS Nonprofit Partnership just released a fantastic report on the impacts of COVID-19 on volunteerism in our province. And I don't think it'll surprise anyone on this call that volunteerism is not quite back to pre-COVID-19 levels. According to their research, the rates have been on the decline for a while, but they're currently still 35% lower than they were 5 years ago. And I popped the link in the chat to that report, and I highly recommend going through it. It's got a lot of detail, and it really helps us not really feel all that alone in our struggles. And their research is echoed Canada-wide. Volunteer Canada says up to 65% of organizations in the country are struggling with a shortage of volunteers. And up to 35% of us have had to reduce services as a result of struggling to find volunteers. There's a little bit of doom and gloom. I know there's still some COVID hesitation out there affecting volunteers, but according to the report, that's not all that's keeping those rates down. The report cites factors that are kind of perennial, like they're perennial but new, like the pandemic making people reassess their priorities, those pesky inflation rates, Saskatchewan's aging population, and time constraints. And I mean, a lot of those are out of our control, which feels a little bit more of that doom and gloomy, but the report also has some hope for us. That shows that participation in informal volunteering, like helping neighbors shovel snow or things like that, is up. So people do still want to help others. And something helpful for us to know is that one of the barriers they cite is, just as always, that drum roll, lack of awareness on how to find volunteer opportunities, which is a huge opportunity for us. And we may think we ask, but the data shows we aren't asking enough or maybe in the right places, which is what brings all of us and all of you here today. And we can't promise we have all the answers, of course, but we're going to start today by hearing about one tool that we can use here in Saskatchewan and Canada-wide to help with volunteer recruitment, and that's VolunteerConnector. Then after Joanna speaks about that, you'll have a chance to chat with each other, aka all of the local experts in Saskatchewan volunteer administration, in some breakout rooms. And we hope you use this time to chat together, maybe commiserate a bit, but this is also your support group and your brainstorming team. So we hope to have some lively chat about what's working and what maybe isn't after the speaker. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joanna and Karen.
All right, well, thank you. It's my great pleasure to introduce Joanna Reeks. We had several opportunities to connect, to talk, and I think she's the best person to tell you a little bit about herself. So with that, I turn it over to you, Joanna.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Karen. And thank you, Christine, for the glowing review of our report from 2022. I'm sure I'll mention it a few times in the presentation as well.
So timely.
I know we're like, this is perfect. So I'm just going to share my screen. All right. And everyone can see my screen okay? Mm-hmm. Wonderful. So before I get started, I just wanted to acknowledge that I'm currently located in Treaty 4 territory, the place colonially known as Regina, Treaty 4 is situated on the traditional land of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota peoples, as well as the homeland of the Métis Nation. I also work for Community Initiatives Fund, which you can see behind me. And it's really important for me to note that the Community Initiatives Fund work and support reaches lands covered by Treaties 2, 4, 5, 6, 8, and 10, the land we now know as Saskatchewan. So a little bit about myself. I have a lot of experience both working with volunteers and as a volunteer. I previously have worked for the Prince Albert Historical Society and Government House here in Regina. And in those roles, I worked frontline with volunteers, trying to recruit volunteers for museum programming and training them. And so I understand the volunteer recruitment and volunteer management struggle. I also have a lot of experience as a volunteer myself. I've served as a volunteer starting in my youth at the Art Gallery of Ontario in Toronto. I've also volunteered at Government House now that I no longer work there. And I was a volunteer team leader with Regina Folk Fest this summer. So coming from it from both sides, I feel like I can give you a little bit of information about this program, VolunteerConnector. Now, VolunteerConnector is a part, sorry, I'm losing my words. So part of what CIF does, I'll start with this, is we are one of the founding partners of the Saskatchewan Nonprofit Partnership, which is a small unincorporated partnership here in our province with the mission to benefit the nonprofit sector through research, networking, public awareness, sector strategy development, and thought leadership, with a vision that the nonprofit sector be widely recognized as a fundamental and essential contributor to Saskatchewan's success. Now, I know not all of you are from nonprofit institutes, but one of the things that we do with SNP is we serve as the regional partner for VolunteerConnector here in Saskatchewan. So VolunteerConnector is a website that serves as a volunteer recruitment platform. It's still quite new, so we're still trying to promote it to both organizations and volunteers. And the service is based in Alberta. So one of the reasons we really promote VolunteerConnector is that it's really very user-friendly, both for organizations looking to recruit volunteers and for volunteers looking for opportunities. And it's free, which is awesome. So as mentioned, if you have any questions, feel free to write them in the chat. We'll have time at the end to chat about it. If you want to stick your hand up and interrupt me, that's fine as well. So before we get started, I just have a few stats from VolunteerConnector. So far in 2023, we've had 1,641 views on postings in Saskatchewan alone, as well as 50 online volunteer applications. So we're going to compare this to the 2022 yearly numbers. There was nearly 5,000 views and 137 applications. So you can see that applications are up already for 2023. We've almost hit half of where we were at last year. Looking at it nationally, from January to November of 2022, there was nearly 1 million views on volunteer postings and nearly 10,000 applications, which is up more than 8,000 from 2021. So it just keeps increasing and we're reaching volunteers more this way. VolunteerConnector sees that our volunteers continue to seek out positions that support Indigenous peoples, the environment, and social justice. And 41% of the volunteer postings last year were remote, which I'm sure we're all familiar with remote volunteer opportunities with COVID-19 and all of that. Another really great thing to note that in Saskatchewan alone, there's 668 volunteers signed up with VolunteerConnector. So there's a pretty good base there to get started. So going through the presentation, I'm going to show you VolunteerConnector, how it can be used by your organization and what it kind of looks like from our side of things, but also what it looks like from the volunteer side of things. I think it's really useful for us to know what that looks like. And I'm sure many of you also have volunteer experience in your personal lives as well. So when you sign into VolunteerConnector, this is what your organizational dashboard will look like. So we use VolunteerConnector here at CIF to recruit volunteers for our peer review committees every November. But since that's closed and I took this screen grab in January, you can see it's really quite quiet. So VolunteerConnector makes it really easy to keep track of how many folks are viewing your posts, applying, and the number of volunteers you've got on your team. There's also the option to upgrade to have access to a cost-effective scheduling software within VolunteerConnector. I'll touch on that a little bit later, but as you can see, you really don't need to upgrade to have access to majority of the features within VolunteerConnector, which is wonderful, especially for smaller organizations. One of the things I also really love is that you can have a monthly report or a yearly report for analytics that show you how many people are viewing your postings, how many volunteers you've got on your team, and the number of applications you've had to your postings. So it's really easy to get all of this information in one place. Easy to see, easy to understand. So now you've created your organizational page on VolunteerConnector, and you're ready to make your first posting. So when you make your postings on VolunteerConnectors, there's a few basic details that you need to include. These are quite simple: title, description of posting, those types of things. But if you're not sure what to include, or you want some tips on how to really make it accessible and make it so that your post is reaching as many volunteers as possible, it's really handy. There's the little light bulb next to each section. And when you're on the website, if you hover over that with your mouse, a little quick tip will pop up with giving you a little bit of information on what they find is best to include. One of the things that's really awesome about VolunteerConnector too is they say it takes less than 2 weeks on average to find the volunteers you're looking for. So that is really good timing for sure. So now that you've got all of this basic information, you're able to post and post your opportunity, make it live, but there's also the chance to add all sorts of additional details. Now, these additional details make it easier for you to curate which volunteers are seeing your opportunity and having it recommended to them. As we look at it from the volunteer side of things, you'll see there's really a lot of customization for volunteers to see roles that are, suited to them and their interests and skills. And so by filling in all of these additional details, you can help curate what folks are seeing. So you've got your first opportunity posted, you're ready to watch your applications come pouring in. It's really wonderful. You can see the applications at all stages, from new, in review, to completed. You'll notice from our page, we just have one applicant. Most opportunities on VolunteerConnector can be applied to directly through the website. Some, like ours, do require a separate form to be filled out. So our posting directed folks to our website, but if you want, you can always, have it straight through VolunteerConnector. We spoke at the VolunteerConnector year-end wrap-up for Regional Hubs meeting in December about having the opportunity to attach your forms to your VolunteerConnector posting. And there's a lot of support with that from organizations who are using VolunteerConnector, but they're not there yet. But we've let them know that this is something we want. So if you have a volunteer opportunity that requires maybe some extra paperwork or a separate form to fill out, hopefully one day you'll be able to connect it directly to your VolunteerConnector posting. But in the meantime, it's very easy to link folks and direct them to your website for more information. So you can see we've had our one applicant to our peer review committee member posting on VolunteerConnector. They also did send in the form, but it was nice to see somebody applied through VolunteerConnector as well. So once you started to build your volunteer team, VolunteerConnector does offer a variety of free features to make it as easy as possible for your organization. So there's no limit on the number of opportunities you can post or number of volunteers you can recruit. You're able to manage your volunteers directly through the website, so organizing them, filtering them through their roles. There's the ability to upload and download lists of volunteers, and the volunteer analytics. So what we were looking at on your organizational dashboard at the beginning. How many people are volunteering? How many people are viewing your postings? So before we jump to the next section, are there any questions about VolunteerConnector for organizations? No? That's okay if you think of some. I know it's kind of like just walking through screen grabs of a website, but one of the reasons we're really pleased to be partnering with VolunteerConnector, and you'll read in the report published in December of last year on volunteerism in Saskatchewan, is that young people in particular really like finding volunteer opportunities online through social media or through online databases and resources like VolunteerConnector. So we think it's a great way to reach a younger volunteer population.
Yeah.
All right, so the next half is looking at how VolunteerConnector works for volunteers. Like I said, I think this is really useful to give you an idea of what volunteers are seeing when they search and come across your opportunities. And it can help you learn how to, tailor how you're posting your opportunities to help find volunteers that you're looking for. So one of the greatest parts about VolunteerConnector as a volunteer is how customizable it is. So the platform, you're able to update your preferences, skills, activities, and causes, which allows the platform to then recommend opportunities that are well suited to you in areas that you're looking to volunteer in. So on my personal link or VolunteerConnector page, some of the preferences that I included were I was looking for remote or online opportunities, and I was looking for a flexible schedule. I also included 4 groups of activities: education, language and art, marketing, PR, fundraising and events, and program support. Now, these are 4 of many activity groups you can select, and there are even subcategories of activities within the broader categories, but otherwise we'd be here all afternoon with me listing them off. I'll just keep to sharing the broader categories with you. So I set these as my LinkedIn, or I don't know why I want to call it LinkedIn, my VolunteerConnector preferences. And then when I went to the Browse Opportunities page, right at the top, I got this beautiful, beautiful blue bar with recommendations just for me. So based on my preferences and activities, VolunteerConnector curated these opportunities that suit me. So the 3 that pop up here, we've got grant researcher and writer, a board director, and an HR team lead. And if you see there's the little arrow here, or even see more, there's more opportunities that suit my preferences and activities. Now, if you don't want to set your preferences and activities, it's really easy for volunteers to just search on the VolunteerConnector Browse Opportunities. So when you go to this page, you're able to select areas that you're interested in to filter your search, as well as activities. So you can see there's tons of different areas that folks want to volunteer in, and I'm sure within all of your various organizations, you'll see things that match your organization here. So I went through and ran a searching with these different interests. So literacy, libraries and learning, arts and culture, special events and festivals, children, youth and family, and LGBTQ+, excuse me. So running a search with just these interests, I didn't select any activities, although you could further refine your search by doing that. I was able to come up with 121 opportunities matching the search. So some examples are various positions with City Kids Regina, Saskatoon Council on Aging, as well as a community support facilitator with Realm Foundation. And so it's really nice that volunteers who are looking for things are able to find all sorts of opportunities based on their interests. And I'm sure there's volunteers whose interests and skills match the volunteer opportunities that you're posting and you're looking for as volunteer recruitment professionals. So volunteers don't even need to sign up for an account to search or use VolunteerConnector, but if they do, there's a number of perks that they can have or that they gain, I'll say. So they gain their own dashboard, like we saw the organizational dashboard. There's the volunteer dashboard. That's a place where they can track all of the placements and the applications they've submitted. There's also the ability for volunteers to see their schedule and the roles they're committed to and to track their volunteer hours. We know that a lot of younger people need a certain amount of volunteer hours for classes they're taking in high school or post-secondary, and this is very handy, a handy way for them to track that easily. As well, it's really handy for determining how long you've been volunteering with an organization. One of the things we again saw in the December 2022 report is that young people really want to volunteer because they think it will increase their job opportunities. So that is their main motivation for volunteering, as opposed to, we know older individuals have more free time and are doing it for other reasons. But yes, they want to volunteer because they want to increase their job opportunities. And we'll see a lot of volunteer work on CVs and resumes. So being able to know exactly how long they volunteered for an organization is very helpful. The last thing that Volunteer Dashboard would allow volunteers to do is follow causes and organizations that they care about and be notified when new positions are available, either within organizations that they're interested in or within causes in general. So the final piece I'll provide before we jump into Q&A and some discussion time is that VolunteerConnector does offer this optional access, this optional upgrade. And there is 3 months of free trial that you can use. We've got a code there. So if anyone is interested, that is there. And yes, so that was my short and sweet introduction to VolunteerConnector as a volunteer recruitment platform that we can use here in Saskatchewan. So thank you very much for coming today. And I'm happy to take any questions or just chat about volunteerism here in Saskatchewan.
Thank you so much, Joanna. I did review these slides beforehand, but you really put the life into it. So I appreciate that.